at the business and enterprise level. I am not going to read Chris's bio. It is quite impressive, but I will tell you that he is the author of numerous best-selling books, including the Agility Factor. If you haven't read it, pick it up. It's definitely worth a read. And Built to Change. And currently, he is research professor of management at Pepperdine, and also an affiliate researcher at the University of Southern California's Center for Effective Organizations. And then prior to that, he was a professor at strategy at the Neoma Business School in France, for Chris, and director of the MSOD program at Pepperdine. So I first met Chris in, I think it was 2006, when I went out to LA to complete a strategic organization design program at the USC Center for Effective Organizations. And I was absolutely thrilled, not only to have Chris as my guide, my faculty guide, but also as a thought partner as I was taking on what proved to be a very complex organization design challenge. Since then, I've had an opportunity to work with Chris, write research, and continuously learn from his applied research and consulting. And what I most love about Chris, perhaps even more than his humor, is his openness. Chris is what I would consider a consummate learner, ever adapting and evolving, and always seeming to be energized in the process. And I can't help but ask, isn't that what we all want and need to be? So I can't think of a better person to kick off this year with this dive into agility. So please join me in welcoming Chris, and thank you, Chris, for joining us.
Thank you, Sally. That was very kind. I wish we could have recorded that. I'd like to share it with my wife so that she understands and appreciates, you know, all that I might be anyway. So, but thanks. Thanks for the very kind words. Very much appreciated, and for sure, I value our partnership and relationship over these years, and being able to talk about the important things that are happening in the world. Certainly that's what I would like to do today, is talk about a variety of things and do my best to pick up on this notion of the future is now, and the future of work is now, and try to understand at least, you know, what's happened here, and how we need to react and respond as HR leaders, for sure, as organizations, absolutely. Because we need to figure this stuff out. So in talking with the program committee, we sort of looked at some of the things that I was thinking about and writing about, and we also decided to sort of bring some of these things forward, but we also decided to be provocative. And so I'm going to, you know, sort of with a kind heart, with a lot of love, poke a little fun at some of the things that we need to do better, and hopefully generate a conversation. So let me get started. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully that's showing up, and pick up on this, you know, the future of work is now, and try and talk about that. Try and build on the notion that if we're going to build sustainable organizations, you sort of first have to be agile. You can't, as the world changes, as the environment changes, as social changes, if you want to represent ESG kinds of goals or sustainability or triple bottom line kinds of things, you have to be agile if you're going to continually adjust. So we'll pick up on that, play with that idea a little bit during our time today. Have you seen this little thing that sort of has shown up in different places? I always got a kick out of it, right? Who led your digital transformation? And it wasn't anybody inside the organization. It sort of came from outside. And what it sort of leans into is this notion of we got hit with a black swan. Now, there's a variety of terms that are, white elephants, black swans, gray dolphins. There's a bunch of things that are being used. But the truth is we got hit with something that was improbable and unpredictable. Now, some people will say, and that's sort of to the third point here, yeah, but Bill Gates talked about a possible virus pandemic and that, yeah, in retrospect, maybe we should have known, but in many cases, this was unpredictable and highly improbable, and it has had massive impact. And as part of this, I started working with Claudia Jules from Google, who's the head of their org design and organization health center of excellence. And he and I have gotten involved in trying to understand the impact of this. And that understanding has taken us in a variety of directions. It started off with, what's the impact and how should we respond organizationally? But it's really sort of gotten a lot bigger than just that question. What I want to do today is I want to start with a story. Sally mentioned that I had the good fortune of living in France for 5 years. And as part of that, we have 3 kids, and the kids were, graduated from college, and we had some, crazy things happen with the family and parents dying and stuff. And so we had to go back and forth quite a bit between LA and Paris. And if you've ever been to the Charles de Gaulle airport before, you know that it's an abomination of an airport. It's just one of the dumbest things you've ever seen. I don't know why there aren't constant traffic wrecks in that place. Navigating the signage, it's just a horrible airport. But at one particular time, Debbie was coming back from the US and I was picking her up, and I, like other airports, is a little place. It's crazy to get into, but there's a little place where you can wait for just a few minutes and you don't have to pay parking. And Debbie was coming up and she was texting me, and I said, okay, I'm parked outside of door number 3. This is Terminal 2A, where a lot of the US flights come in. And I was parked outside of door number 3. And she says, well, I'm at door number 6. And I said, okay, we're texting back and forth. And she says, there's no crosswalk, so I can't get over to the free parking area. And I'm at door 3. And I said, there's a crosswalk here. She says, okay, I'll come down to door 3. And I said, okay, great, I'll meet you inside and help you with your bags, and we'll do that. We were in alignment, right? So I go into this door here, door 3, and I start to look for Debbie coming down the street. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm 6'5". I'm not hard to see in an airport. And I'm looking for Debbie. I can't, maybe she got confused and she went to door 7 and she's turning around and coming back to door 3. I'm looking for her, I'm checking my watch. Where's Debbie? It shouldn't have taken her this long to get here. And I kind of walk out toward the sidewalk and I look at the car, and Debbie's standing there next to the car. And what? I come running her out, and she's, oh, it's so good to see you, kisses, bises in French, you kiss each other on the cheeks. It's so good to see you. I said, wait, we agreed you were going to go over to door 3. I was going to help you with the luggage, and then we were going to go to the car and leave. She says, yeah, I know. I said, but when I got to door 4, there was a crosswalk, and so I just went over and found the car. And I said, that's not what we agreed to. We agreed, we were in alignment. You come over here, I go over there, we meet, I help you across. She says, yeah, but I found the thing when we got there. The point of this exercise, the point of this story, is that today, at least, I would like us to align on a set of outcomes, not align on a set of processes. When you align on a set of processes, it prevents people from innovating. If we agree on the objective, if we had just said, okay, let's find a way for both of us to get to the car as fast as we can, I'll look for you, you look for me, but let's eventually get to the car, probably would have been fine. But I had this expectation that she was going to behave in a certain way. And that expectation actually prevents me and her from innovating. So what I want us to do today is I want us to agree on some outcomes, some things that we probably can agree on that are good things to do. And as a result of a couple of breakouts, where I'll give you a chance to just sort of brainstorm some ideas, we'll capture all those ideas, share all those ideas, and as a group, you can run around and innovate, come back and share with each other what you've been able to do and learn, right? So I want to get aligned on outcomes today, because if we get aligned on, okay, how we're going to do it, we won't be able to innovate as much. So that's kind of my objective for today. And in doing that, what I've noticed is that as a response to COVID and Black Lives Matter and some of these other issues, we're spending a lot of time adapting. And what I would like us to do is spend more time thinking about how to become adaptable, how to become agile. And I want to sort of explore that in different ways. And I think there's a big difference in just adapting because we're reacting to something as opposed to becoming adaptable so that we can repeat that adaptability over time. Okay? Just to sort of level set everything, that here's my definition. This is the definition that we've been using for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now. It seems to be holding up pretty well as we continue to do research. But agility is the ability to make timely, effective, and sustained change. Okay, that few people sort of disagree with that. Where I depart a little from some others is in saying that agility has to be timely, effective, and sustained change when and where it results in a performance advantage. In other words, you don't have, not everything in your organization has to be agile. I don't want an agile payroll process. I want a reliable, predictable, stable, Six Sigma to death payroll process. I don't want, I think we'll try and let's see what happens if we pay people 1 day later. No, I want it, right? So we have to think about where in the organization is it important to be agile, not just the whole thing. Yeah. So I think it's a little different than a lot of people. And second, I don't want organizations changing for change's sake. I want organizations changing because it makes a difference in their performance. And that could be ESG, it could be effectiveness, and sustainability, anything, okay? All right. There's this notion in organization change that all organization change is preceded by a personal one. That means each of us has to sort of recognize that we are probably walking around with a stability mindset. And when I show people this picture and I ask them, what do you think of the driver? They usually come back with some very nasty words, talking about, different people and the nature and character of this poor Porsche driver. They come back with some pretty nasty words in talking about them because, and it's funny, in an age, right, where we're trying to be more diverse and inclusive, it's always funny to me, the driver of this is always a guy. I don't know why that is, but whoever this driver is, he parked in 2 spaces, and that's terribly selfish and self-centered, and he's a horrible person, all right? And that's the first thing usually that comes to your mind. And that, I think, is because we look at a situation at a current point in time and we make a judgment. Instead of asking our session, is there any other reason why this situation in front of us could exist? For example, somebody from, an hour ago who was a really horrible person parked in the wrong place, and everybody else who parked in here, ended up, slightly off kilter. All right? We have to start thinking in terms of time. Agility is about change. Change occurs over time. And we have to start adjusting the way we think about things. And in that sense, it's really odd for me to listen to people talk about we need to be more resilient. The time to talk about being resilient is not when you're flat on your back. The time to talk about being resilient is you need to be ready. Resilience is a capability that needs to be built. And you don't become resilient when you're lying flat on your back. And that's what agility is. If you're agile, you're resilient. Okay? So I think the whole notion of being resilient is a little short-sighted. I'd like people to step back and really think about what they're doing. We need to become agile. And if you're agile, you're resilient. Okay? And so kind of that's sort of the big picture that I wanted to share. Let's get into some of the details. And what struck Jules, Cloudy Jules, he goes by the name Jules. What struck Jules and I was that this little tiny virus decimated a global economy and ripped apart a social fabric. And in doing so, COVID revealed a whole bunch of things, right? And I want to highlight 4 of them. I want to get us to talk about these today in abbreviated form, right? I wish we had more time, but let's take an abbreviated opportunity to sort of look at some of these things. So in the first, in the upper left, despite all the rhetoric, most organizations failed key tests of being agile. And so I think the work now is how do we build a forward-looking, insight, future, externally oriented capability inside the organization. Small or large, I don't care what size your organization, we need to have more conversations about the future and the implications of that on our organization. It's a key aspect of agility. In the upper right, organizations lack a change capability. Brilliant improvisation is not agility. Agility is a repeatable resource. And just because you did some amazing things, I'm not discounting the amazing things, but agility is being able to repeat adaptability. And so I think the work now is to learn from what we did, learn from this brilliant improvisation that a lot of you did, and start to apply those learnings to building a more robust and agile organization. So I'll talk about those. We'll do a breakout for 15 minutes, give you a chance to sort of wrestle with some of those ideas. Then I'll come back and talk about the bottom 2, which are a little more specifically related to the HR organization. I think HR and OD has been relatively ineffective. This is one of the things I think COVID revealed. We have been relatively ineffective in speaking truth to power. And the work we now need to do is to recognize that complacency and be a little bolder, right? Timidity and complacency are our enemy. We have to step up because in many cases, racism, social justice, inequality are more than unconscious. They're structural. And I think as an HR organization, we have the possibility of taking a cold, hard look at our organizations in a multi-stakeholder framework. I think that's really important. I want to talk about what I think the process might look like. So those are 4 things I want to talk about with you today. Give you 2 chances. They'll be short. I apologize. But let's talk about these things. Okay. Organizations were not ready. I think organizations are talking a pretty good game about Agile, right? Look at all the Agile teams we have. We've adopted the Agile methodology. Our organization pivoted, blah, blah, blah. They weren't ready for this. And I think we are we're trying to stay in our comfort zone rather than looking at sort of nightmare scenarios. We're very uncomfortable talking about some really crazy things that might happen. We love to stay in our little safe cocoons. I also think that the COVID virus revealed that we worship at the altar of efficiency, and we're paying much more attention to operational capabilities than the ability to change. And as a result of that, as a result of thinking that efficiency was effective, instead of realizing that efficiency cut out all the ability to be flexible. I think that organizations are realizing now we have to rethink some of that. Organizations say they acted agilely, but I think they acted agilely by necessity, not by design. we need to sort of step back and say, okay, what does that mean for us? I also think it is important to sort of recognize that some organizations did it right. And why did they do it right? Here's the BASF is a global chemical company, right? They make some really interesting things. And as I talked to them about what they did, right? They had been working on digitalization. They've been trying to, figure out what does that mean? How do we change our operating model? They had, over the course, because in chemicals, it's kind of a very cyclical business. They had to go through some belt tightening kinds of processes, and they learned from that. They had, this is important, they had crisis management plans clearly defined, and they had crisis teams identified. That was all ready, they just flipped the switch, right? Safety was always has always been an issue in that kind of an industry. It's a critical thing. And they just keep using that in different ways. So now safety is being, morphed a little bit into, yes, be safe as you do your job, but also be safe with your family and your community. Be safe with your customer and take good care of them. They just tweaked something that was part of who they were, and they just tweaked it a little bit. And they were already experimenting with working virtually, and the organization keeps learning, right? And when I've talked with other organizations about this example, they say, well, we've done all those things. And I say, yeah, but did you use the knowledge did you bring that knowledge forward when COVID came, or did you just run around with your hair on fire and react? And I think that's the difference with what they sort of learned. And they took what they were learning and they applied it to the situation, and they made a very good transition. And it wasn't it was difficult, no doubt, but they used what they had prepared for. So there's organizations that are doing this. I think too many organizations did not. And so what's the work now? The work now is, how are you going to get your leadership team to have conversations about the future, right? Can you get someone in your organization to sort of take a look outside and be focused on the external environment and ask, how is social and technical and ecological things changing? And how are we bringing that information into our decision making? Can you get a futurist to come and talk to your organization? Can you go to a conference where a futurist talks and listen to people who spend a lot of time thinking about the future? Go listen to them. Entertain some nightmare scenarios, because I think we do need to sort of get outside our comfort zone and begin to say, what are we going to do when this thing happens again? Because something like it's going to happen again. The white paper exercise is kind of a classic thing. It's been around for quite a while. Basically, it says to if you're going to have a leadership team meeting, have everybody bring in an article they read that they think speaks to some sort of implication for the company. And as you come into the meeting, have everybody explain their article. This is what I read. This is what I think it means for our organization. We should be paying attention to this. This is the implication. This is the provocation I think this article raises for us. And, there's nothing so good as getting out and living in the customer's shoes for a while and understanding what their world is like. To get outside of your own, gets outside your own world. So I think there's some very practical things we can do, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to be intentional about looking outside our organization and trying to understand what's going on outside and bringing that information in, right? That's the key. That's the first thing, right? I think we were a little full of ourselves. We thought we were pretty agile, but I don't think we were ready. The second thing, to cue up the first sort of breakout, is to recognize that organizations don't have a change capability. They were brilliantly improvisational. We have all these examples of distilleries and brewers and different people who said, I can repurpose my production process and make hand sanitizer. We had, no masks, And so as a country, we've figured out how to create a cottage industry of mask making. You know, my wife, you know, said, here's a pair of scissors, you cut this out. And I'm gonna, you know, you're the cutter on the sewer, and, you know, tried to crank out a bunch of masks and donate them to the hospital. There's a whole, I mean, if you just, it'd be interesting to check and see what Google looked like over that March, April timeframe. The number of people who put out patterns for figuring out how to sew masks and different fabrics and elastic things and ties and stuff. It was pretty amazing, you know. But is that a routine? Is that a repeatable process inside of our world? You know, you could probably replicate it. I'm not sure I would call it a routine though. And I was struck by a story from Kaiser Permanente. I was talking to the physicians at Kaiser Permanente, and they, to a person, I mean, I got tired of them telling me the story. You know, well, as physicians, we always thought telemedicine was a really stupid idea. We're doctors, we like to interact with our patients, we like to see them, feel them, touch them, work with them. You know, telemedicine, that'll never work. And then today, it's like, I love telemedicine. Wow, telemedicine's great. I don't have to be infected. I can work with them. I have all the medical records right in front of me. Look how we changed. Okay, so, you know, can you do that again? All right. Brilliant improvisation is not agility. So I think there's a lot of great examples of what we did and how we responded in the crisis, and I'm not taking away anything from any of those things. What I am saying is that organizations did not have the ability to replicate this over and over again and change and adapt. They were adapting, they weren't adaptable. You have to go inside the organization and peel away the onion and say, is there a process? Is there a way of thinking about these changes? And I'm not sure a lot of organizations have them. They were too focused on efficiency. And when you're so focused on efficiency and taking out waste, you lose the ability to be flexible. Okay. So I have just a little, this is not necessarily audience participation, but which of these things do you think is associated with agility? If I said you could only pick 2 or 3 of these characteristics, which one of these do you think, you know, again, pick 2 or 3, as you look at the screen, what, you know, 2 or 3 of these things that you think are most characteristic of agility. I asked this question of about 300 C-suite executives in Europe and North America. And I'll show you the results in just a second. If you had to pick, you know, 2 or 3 of these, that, you know, that's what agility is. Yeah, what would you pick? Okay. Okay. First of all, almost all of them are characteristics of agility except speed. And that's a lot, kind of surprising to people usually. The top 3 up there, those are outcomes. Those are things that agile organizations are able to produce in terms of results. Agile organizations have a continuous flow of innovative products and services. They have a history of making successful organization changes, and not just little organization changes, large changes in their capabilities. And they're able to sustain high levels of performance because of that continuous flow of services and products. All of the red checks are characteristics of the organization's design, how the organization is actually put together in terms of systems and structures and processes. And the one that is not a characteristic of agility is speed, although a lot of people talk about it. And what I've come to understand about agile organizations is agile organizations are agile because they're prepared. Okay? They don't run around with their hair on fire. They're prepared to act and respond quickly. And so here was the results, right? If you said speed of decision making and action was a characteristic, you're not alone. But one of the things I'm trying to educate people about is to see that a little differently. that speed is not just pure raw speed is not what makes organizations agile. In fact, if all you can do is just run very, very fast, there's a really good likelihood that you'll skip over and make a very fast decision on a decision that you should take your time and be very careful about. Okay? So speed can be a defense against depth. Some decisions require you to be very, very careful. And if everything is just going fast, you might go a little fast on a decision that needs to take some time. Turns out, I think, agile organizations are disciplined. Okay? What's the work now? The work now is to learn. You all pivoted, you all responded, you all adapted to the COVID crisis in a variety of ways. Virtual work. You're re-looking at your DE&I performance. You're all responded in some way. Now what I suggest that we need to do, because we have been unfrozen, if you like that change framework, we're unfrozen. What have we learned? What should we keep and build on? Where do we need to invest in inefficiency so we gain flexibility? All right? How do we build on those learnings and go forward? What are the principles that we need to adapt and invest inside of our organization? And where should we build capabilities that matter? Where in the organization is it important to be agile? And then figuring out how we're going to assess and rapidly sort of take advantage of that. So while we're unfrozen, how can we sort of move forward and get some things done? All right, so I think there's a step that as HR folks, we should be leading the organization so that we can begin to put some of that agility into the organization. Okay, all right, so I have a couple of, I'm gonna give you 15 minutes in a breakout. Stephanie's gonna randomly put people into groups, and I wanna give you 15 minutes to talk about this stuff. We will post those questions. I'm gonna post these questions. Stephanie's gonna put these questions so you can all have them and see them. We're not gonna have a report out, right? Back to, I want to align around the objectives. I want you in a group to just sort of brainstorm answers to this question, okay? I want somebody in the group to volunteer to take notes and just sort of capture all the ideas people have about how they would think about responding to these two challenges. And then email those notes to Stephanie. She's going to compile them and we'll share them with the group. Okay, so just in the interest of time and speed, I'm going to ask everybody, get in your group, brainstorm ideas, don't be shy, time is the enemy, and have a discussion brainstorm session. Somebody take notes, send those to Stephanie, we'll share those with everybody so that we can get a broader sense of the voice of this group. Okay? 3 questions. How can I support a more prepared organization? What can I do to get that external future focus going, get that conversation going inside the organization? Who should be put in charge of capturing all the learnings? How are we going to do that? How are we going to capture those learnings so that we can apply them and look at them and apply them in a strategic way? And where in the organization would the ability to change have a high payoff? Okay? So 15 minutes, brainstorm ideas, somebody volunteer. I need somebody to volunteer quickly. If you're an introvert, this might be a big chance for you, right? To just sort of, I'll take notes. You don't have to say anything. You can do something, all right? So Stephanie, randomly assign us into groups and we'll be back in 15 minutes, all right? Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone.
I thought 15 minutes was going to be a long time, Chris, but wow, that went fast.
Goes fast, doesn't it? It's painful.
We got to question number one.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Went to question number one. Now, again, we'll use those of us professors, we use the law of large numbers, right? Somebody probably talked, at least one group probably talked about something of all the questions, which is what we want. Whoever took notes, grab those together, send those over to Stephanie at info@hrleadershipgroup.org. Again, we'll pull those together and share those with people. It'd be great if we could share in lifetime, but as a professor, I have lots of things to talk about. So let me get on to the next couple of things, give you another break, and then hopefully if I do my job right, we'll have a little chance at the end for some questions. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen again. And the next two things I want to talk about are a little tougher. What Jules and I sort of realized as we looked at how organizations were responding to the COVID was sort of the HROD community thought that we were being progressive and pushing and trying to get organizations to do the right thing. And at the end of the day, we got to admit we were pretty timid and pretty complacent. We weren't pushing all that hard. And so I think there's two things that we have as a HROD community we got to start thinking about. The first one is that all these issues that have shown up, right? What did COVID reveal? In the same way that Katrina revealed poverty in the Gulf Coast, in the same way that the Charlie Hebdo attacks, terrorism attacks in France revealed a country that was really struggling with immigration and racism, COVID revealed to us that these racial, social injustice and inequality issues are not just unconscious. In many cases they are. They're also structural, right? And so as you think about how COVID has disproportionately affected people of color, different races, and religions and things like that, right? We have to realize that housing, the way the zoning has been set up by state, local, city governments, access to healthcare, the way, how different people have different kinds of jobs, how those jobs are treated and designed, the extent to which education is available, and how we think about pay equity. All those things are structural. And as an organization, you can sort of turn your head and say, well, that's actually a government problem. When in fact, your HR policies affect and can work with all of these issues, right? So I think we've got to take a cold, hard look, right, at what we do. Take a cold, hard look at what we do and begin to understand what privilege is. And I ran across this article by John Amici I think he nailed it. I just sat back in my chair. I said, that's it. Privilege is the absence of inconvenience. And I think if we're gonna address this and not just kind of put peanut butter over it and sugarcoat the whole thing, I think we're gonna have to pull together inside of your organizations a multi-stakeholder group. Different races, different creeds, religions, LGBTQ, we gotta bring all these people together. And one of the first things each of us is going to have to do is admit that we're part of the problem. That as a white man of privilege, I have to start understanding how I have contributed to this, either through ignorance or willful neglect or, simple decisions. I have to start, owning the fact that I made a contribution. The second thing that we're going to have to do in this group is each of the people in this group is going to have to say, I'm going to give up something in order to move to a more equal society. I have to recognize as a white man of privilege that I have to give up something so that we are equal. And that's going to be a tough conversation. And like I said, I think I have run around thinking I'm, making a big difference in the world. And maybe I'm not even scratching the surface. And so I have to be a little bolder and a little more confrontive of the people that I work with and say, how can we go through each of the systems in our organization and ask to what extent have we made this inconvenient for a range of people, but in particular, people of color, minorities, races, creeds, that sort of thing. I think that's going to be a tough conversation. I was listening to a gentleman he works at SHRM, and he's responsible for the learning organization. He told a statistic. It's not an official statistic, it was just his impression, but based on some data. But he said that in a normal year, the SHRM hotline sort of takes 500,000 calls. They took over 1 million calls in March, April, and May.
Wow.
And they had 2 questions. How do I deal with COVID, and how do I have conversations about race? Because we haven't sort of stood up, and we haven't leaned into the problems that we need to lean into. Okay? That's the work we have to do now. Just take a look at the structural issues inside of our organizations and how they have they been made inconvenient for certain classes of people. Second thing is, I think we've got to do a better job of speaking truth to power, right? It is in some ways unconscionable that there is that gap between the top and the bottom of the organizations, right? That's just, I think, I want to say it was Tom Friedman, it might have been Paul Krugman. It was one of those, high-flying op-ed people at the New York Times. They figured that Jeff Bezos could give every employee in Amazon $150,000 and he'd still be the richest man. Ouch. Right? So I think we're going to have to recognize that as the HRLG community, our job is to represent these shareholders and stakeholders, shareholders too, but the stakeholders, and to start asking organizations, how are we organized to build the capacity for change inside of our organization? Because as I look at our way of organizing today, I think we may actually be organized to prevent change, right? The HR organization, the centers of excellence, again, this might be a little larger organization, your organization might be smaller, but I think the metaphor here is still going to hold. That too often we've got relationships with the business, and the business is sort of sees like as a, we're here to help. Well, you're not very helpful sometimes. You don't understand, you don't speak our language, you come in here, you're compliant, you're trying to prevent us, keep us out of jail, I have a business to run, and you're here to help, and all you want me to do is, figure out what the leadership competency should be, right? I actually think we may be poorly designed, right? Because if we expect an HR business partner to be good at employee relations, benefits, compensation, organization change, talent management, career advice, and that's just kind of a kludgy arrangement. And it's just not very powerful if we're trying to build an agile organization where one group is trying to figure out how to do all the people stuff and another group is trying to run the business. We need something a little more integrated. And what we've been watching is a set of organizations are having a different conversation now about how to set things up. And it's a range. I mean, look at this. I've been talking with the International Monetary Fund. This is a group of economists, right? They're all economists. I've been talking with Google. I mentioned Jules's work there. and how we're thinking about change at Google. Google is going through some of the same trials and tribulations all of you have gone through. They've had a pretty good run of being a search organization and an ad revenue business model, but they've moved into different businesses now, not just search, but cloud, enterprise services, YouTube, right? And they're facing real competition now, whereas they didn't before. The International Monetary Fund is having to deal with the pandemic, the economic fallout of all of this, and how do we keep economies afloat? Gore has all these different technologies, all these different products, and a real decentralized organization. How do they think about change and design as sort of the same thing? So there's a range of organizations now that are starting to ask, why is HR over here? And we've actually separated HR from organization development and organization effectiveness, and strategies over here, and DE&I is over here, and sustainability is up here. These organizational units are now competing with each other for resources and attention. And put yourself in the place of a business manager who says, geez, I have to have an appointment with the DEI people, and now I have to have an appointment with the sustainability people. Oh, I got this change project that I'm working on. I think what a lot of these organizations are doing now is they're starting to think about, I need to put these functions and specialties together so that they speak with one voice. And with the business, we start to build capacity for change, for sustainability, for diversity and inclusion, and all of that stuff, and putting that together. And I think there's going to be some structural changes happening soon that pull this integrated thing together. All right, okay, couple more. You got 15 more minutes to go play. Same rules. Pretend you're in a Robin Williams concert. 15 minutes, you're going to throw out a bunch of stuff, God rest his soul. Going to brainstorm ideas. Somebody be a note taker. 15 minutes. Stephanie's going to put you into groups. 3 questions for you to play with. She'll try and put these in broadcast so you can see them. Who do I need with me to address structural bias in my organization? Where are we being timid? And how can I gather the support to be bolder? What structural change will most increase the power of HR and OD in my organization? Brainstorm some ideas about how we can get this flywheel started so we get this organization moving. Stephanie, go ahead and break them out. I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. Good job. Next couple of, as the program committee kind of rolls stuff out, maybe there's an opportunity to share back and say, here's what I tried, here's what we learned, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and see if we can move the needle a little bit on some of these issues, on agility and diversity and equity, and see if we can do a better job. So we got a few minutes left. I'm happy if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, drop a question into the chat box. And I want to respect people's time, so if you need to run off at the bottom of the hour, please feel free to do so. It was a pleasure working with you all. If you want to stay on, I can stay on for a few more minutes and answer questions, but I'll open it up.
Stephanie, we can keep it open for a few more minutes if there's a lot of questions. That was I meant to ask that as a question.
No worries, Gary. Take care.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Chris, it's Mary Vales. So can you talk a little bit more, the slide you had with the OD hub? What caught my ear, right, was we put so much on our HRBPs, and we're currently talking about that in my organization, but really helped me see the difference between HRBPs who do everything as compared to what would you consider part of the OD hub?
Oh, yeah, it's right. And the way I sort of have talked about it is I think there are some organizations doing a thought experiment. And if you want to hear a little more about it, that little hub thing that I created there is going to be in an article that's coming out in People and Strategy magazine with the next edition. I'm not sure, it's either this month or October or something. So I talk a little bit more about it there as kind of this response. And these organizations that we're talking to, the number of people who have adopted the Ulrich model it's pretty amazing. And yet that Ulrich model's effectiveness relies so much on, there's so much pressure put on the HRBP in that role. And, it's kind of an Uber, that's an Uber person, and trying to find people with all of those skill sets is pretty difficult. As a result, we push a lot of the stuff back to the COEs and say, well, if I need the expertise, I'll bring it in. And I just, the message I'm getting from organizations, that's just the word is kludgy, right? It's just kind of bolted on, and it's the best we can do under the circumstances. The second thing that contributed to it was this, to what extent is the HRBP tied at the hip to the strategy person? And there's too much distance between those two people. The HR person needs to know where the strategy's headed. And the strategy person needs to know, I've got these capabilities. You can't create a strategy that I can't implement, and sort of vice versa. So it's about, how do I pull some of the things that are, competing for attention of the business into a single voice. And that's what's underneath it. Exactly how this thing might lay out, who does it report to, how does it work with the business, how is it better than COEs with the business. I think that's kind of the essence of your question, is that's still to be worked out. But I do see this notion of, we can't have these different specialties not being integrated with a single voice to the business. So I know that's not a perfect answer, but that's where we're at.
No, it was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, we've been talking at the organizational level. Do you have any suggestions at the personal level as practitioners of things we can do to keep our edge sharp and to keep ourselves open to sounds and ideas that we haven't noticed before?
Yeah, for sure, Larry. I think this notion of being externally focused has to be a discipline. I want to say that we even talked about this when you and I were working together. That when an organization is under stress, right, what the natural response is to sort of protect yourself and to look down. And in times like these, I think it's counterintuitive to sort of open yourself up. So I think that has to be intentional, because the natural response is to look inward. So I think part of staying sharp is get outside the organization, get outside your discipline, get outside and start exposing yourself to different kinds of ideas. My wife and I'm not going to, this is not a political statement, but my wife and I are trying as hard as we can to listen to as many different political voices right now. And sometimes that's hard. But I think it's important that we understand what's going on in all the different places in this season. So that's one thing. I think it's sort of getting out there. And the second thing, you know, as I talk about structural issues, right, and try and get people to talk about structural issues, I've been accused at times of discounting, you know, sort of unconscious bias training and stuff like that. I don't ever mean to do that. And if people haven't, they should, so that they can become more aware of, back to those first two questions in the multi-stakeholder thing. Right? You know, it's more than just on being aware that I'm unconsciously biased. I need to now take a step forward and say, here's my contribution, and sort of wrestling with that and saying, you know, how have I been a part of that, so that I can take action instead of just becoming aware.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
So let's close down, and it's really hard for me. Anyone that knows me, I love being in person with groups. I love the energy. So as we wish Chris over on the West Coast a great day, join me in unmuting yourself and giving him a round of applause so we can let him know how much we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks everyone for joining us. Stay tuned, and we will see you soon.
Soon. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dorian.
C'est super, au revoir.
Absolument.
Ok.
Take care.
Tu étais à Rouen?
À Reims.
Reims,
Nous
ok.
avons habité à Reims,
Ok.
dans la région de Champagne.
Moi, j'étais à Rouen pour 3 ans. Donc.
Pour 3 ans, c'est bien.
I can start speaking Spanish.
All right, bye guys.
All right.
Have a great day. Thanks, Chris. That was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.